Mama, welcome to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I am your host, Dr. Michelle Gibbs, and this podcast exists to help scholarly mamas like you to achieve your life and academic goals without sacrificing what matters most. Here, we're changing the overwhelm, juggle, struggle narrative around what it means to be a mama on an academic journey to one of empowerment, fulfillment, and purposeful success. So how do we successfully navigate these journeys? Well, first, we need the space to embrace this unique blend. Let's begin by saying yes to creating a life that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside, because that's when we truly become purposefully whole. So get ready for the most non-traditional, unconventional, and revolutionary approach to PhD motherhood, because one thing I have learned over my many years of experience on this journey is that if you want something different, you have to do something different. But you must be brave enough to think differently first. So, Mama, are you in? Fabulous! Let's begin. These are our journeys of becoming. How can you make the PhD motherhood journey easier? What can you do to make this journey more doable? If you are a mama who's navigating a PhD journey, wearing many hats and, dipping in and out of overwhelm, I want to share with you in this episode just a few of the things that helped me to survive and not just survive, but thrive all the way through my PhD journey. And that doesn't mean that there weren't hardships and there weren't struggles, but what that means is that I was able to overcome those. And so I want to share with you just some of the things that I did, some of the decisions and choices that I made that helped me to make this journey easier and more doable. And of course, some of these things will not apply. Some of these tips that I share in this episode, some of these choices will not be applicable to everybody. But the whole point is that you just take what applies and leave what doesn't. This is not a prescription. This is not telling you this is what you need to do, but this is more sharing my own experience, and you can take from that what you will. Okay, so the first thing that I did to make my PhD motherhood journey easier and more doable was that I did my PhD part-time. I did my PhD part-time. I did it part-time from the very beginning. I did have the option of doing it full-time, but I chose not to do that so that I could engage in other work and other things. During the period of my PhD, I chose to do my PhD part-time, and that really helped me because number one, it took off the pressure of having to finish it, in quick time. And so I felt less pressured in that sense. I knew I had more time. Obviously, there were some challenges with doing a PhD part-time. Maybe I'll talk about that in another episode. But what it did help me to do was it made it feel more doable for me because I did not have to be consumed by my PhD. I didn't have really tight schedules and deadlines that just felt they were coming quick and fast and furious. Instead, things were a bit more spread out and I navigated my journey at a slower pace. And so that made it easier for me to see it through to completion. Okay. The second thing I did to make my PhD motherhood journey easier and more enjoyable was that we utilize paid nursery childcare and after school clubs. And so I know not everybody subscribes to external childcare, but because we are living in a country where we do not have our family nearby, we had to pay for the childcare that we needed. And so from the very beginning, once maternity leave was over, once everybody was back to work and the routines, our sons each attended nursery and they did that part-time. For those of you who are new here, I began my PhD journey as a mama of one. And then during my PhD, my husband and I welcomed our second son, and then we had our third son. And so we have got from teenager to toddler. And because of that, I feel like I have experienced lots of different seasons of PhD motherhood, dealing with newborns, adjusting to that. And I had cesarean section. So it's the healing and recovery and all of that. But also then the changes that come as motherhood evolves, as your children get older. And so I've experienced some parts of that as well. Obviously, I don't have adult children, but during my PhD, I navigated those early years of motherhood and, going from a new mama to a mama of 3 during my PhD journey. And one of the things that really helps, as I said, was having paid childcare. Now, you don't have to use a nursery. You may use a nanny, you may use a babysitter, you may use a childminder, you may, have another form of childcare. But just having that childcare made it so much easier for me to be able to focus on my research and the things I needed to do for that. Obviously, my research was clinically focused, and so I needed to go to clinics and the hospital and various places to recruit my participants and see patients who were in my study. And so all that traveling, I would not have been able to do that with my children not in some form of childcare, because obviously my husband was obviously working as well. So that really helped me to have the time available to be able to do my research well, to be able to collect the data I needed to collect, to be able to do the analysis and those research related tasks, write my thesis without having to worry about also at the same time looking after my kids. And so obviously they weren't in childcare, round the clock. They were there for a set amount of time. But by having that time, I knew that the time that they were there, I needed to just be very focused, very productive, get my tasks done, get my to-do list sorted, and get the work completed. And so that almost enhance my efficiency in a way, because I knew that I didn't have hours and hours and hours and unlimited time to do this work. I needed to get it done when I had the support in the form of paid childcare. So that was another thing that really made it easier. And of course, as they started school, they then attended after school clubs when we needed them to, extracurricular activities when we could afford to pay for those things. And they were, I think, just by using the after school clubs and school clubs and things, it allowed some difference for them in terms of social interaction outside of school and extracurricular activities, but it also provided childcare as well when we needed it. And it's not hours and hours, but every little bit helps and allowed me to be able to get my research, my PhD work done. Okay, so the third thing that we did, my husband and I did this to make my PhD journey easier. And first of all, I don't take it for granted that I have an extremely supportive husband who is just as involved in our kids' lives as I am. And so I've made lots of sacrifices, obviously, on this journey to make it possible and doable for myself. But my husband has been a partner in that. And he too has made some sacrifices to make it possible for us to be able to navigate this journey. And so one of the things that he did was he compressed his work hours. So instead of working the full week, he worked fewer days per week, longer hours, but that allowed him to have some time off, which then allowed me to have time to work on, my research stuff, my projects outside of work. And it allowed me to have that additional support without having to pay all of the time for extra childcare. So yes, we did pay for extra childcare on a regular basis weekly, but then there were some days where my husband will just watch the kids and look after them and do everything he needed to do with them while I was busy either collecting data or working on my analysis or writing up my thesis. So that ended up giving me at least one extra day per week to be able to do that. But it really allowed us to have that extra support, because we don't have our families nearby. So every bit of support that we put in place is really either a financial sacrifice from my husband and I, or a sacrifice of our time, or, changing up our hours and schedules to make it possible to be able to navigate this journey with a bit more ease. So the fourth thing that made my PhD journey easier as a mama was having supportive supervisors. Now, I do not take this for granted one bit, because I actually think that I think I remember reading it some time ago. I think when I was considering doing a PhD, one of the things that was said to me was choose your supervisors wisely, because they will either make or break your PhD. And I think that is so true. And I am so incredibly grateful for the supervisors that I had. They were so supportive. They were incredibly understanding, supportive, encouraging, everything you can think of. And I think that just made my entire PhD journey feel much more doable. It made it feel much more doable for me. I could see myself taking the journey through to completion, because I knew that I had incredible support from people who were there to guide me through this journey. And honestly, that cannot be taken for granted. Honestly, like it even became part of my why. Not that I was doing it for them, but the belief, the motivation, the unwavering support that I had from my PhD supervisors. Honestly, if I didn't have that, I would have struggled so much more on this journey. It would not have been impossible, but it definitely would have been incredibly harder. It would have been just 100 times harder. And so I am so grateful and give so much thanks for the support that I got in the form of supervisors. I mean, especially when, perhaps work wasn't very supportive, or I didn't have a supportive manager, then it really highlighted for me the importance of having a supportive PhD supervisor. And so I just give so much thanks for that. And because of them, I was able to do all sorts of things during my PhD. I had so many maternity breaks and all that. And I cannot tell you, during all of that, all I received was support. I did not feel any pressure, not from them at least, and from other people perhaps, but not from them. And I did not feel that pressure to, or that guilt of, you're going off on maternity leave. What about your PhD? I felt really, really supported. So I'm really so grateful for that. And I think it really does make such a difference to have a supportive PhD supervisor. So if you happen to be at the stage where you are thinking, contemplating whether you want to embark on a PhD journey, think very, very long and hard and carefully about who you are selecting to be your PhD supervisors, because literally it will make or break the journey. So that definitely made my journey as a PhD mother so much easier. And that wasn't by chance, that was by intention. There was a lot of intention that went into who I chose to supervise my PhD. And I think that paid off for me because they were so incredibly supportive. Okay, so the fifth thing that made my PhD journey as a mama easier, more doable, was having bedtime and story time routines. Now, this didn't only make it easier, it also made it more enjoyable, because I obviously, I enjoy that time with my kids. I enjoyed especially bedtime routines where we would, we'd have dinner and then we'd get ready for showers and bath times. Then we would read a story together, as age appropriate, of course. And then we would have a devotion and say our prayers and reflections, and then off to bed. And honestly, I think routine really works for kids. I think children generally thrive on having some kind of routine. And by doing that, it reduced the number of nights where there was this battle of going to bed. Like that got easier and easier because we had that routine. And obviously children are different. Our first son, he loves routine, and so he thrived on that. And there were very few nighttime meltdowns and things because he was so used to the routine. He just, he didn't fight it. He just knew it was time to go off to sleep, and that's what he did. And our subsequent children eventually got into that routine as well, because that was the routine of the household. It wasn't just, you need to go to bed and you get to stay up late. No, everybody was going to bed. And so I think that having those routines in place really made it easier, because it made my evenings a lot more predictable. And it wasn't always predictable because, of course, there are things like illness and change of plans or events or appointments and other things that will come up that may change that routine. But by having that routine, I felt like I could literally put on my calendar, I'm going to work on my thesis between 8 and 10 p.m. And that was almost, a given that I would be able to do that. And so it just made our days and our nights easier. It made it more predictable. You could bank on having that time in the evening if you wanted, or whether it was, wake up a couple hours earlier in the morning and get some work done, which is what I often did. I'm much more of a morning person. So I knew like getting everybody to bed on time made also the next morning easier, because then, once their bodies are used to requiring a certain amount of sleep, they would sleep a certain amount of time and then they would wake up at a set time. So that felt like a much more reliable way of navigating the journey, by encouraging a household routine whereby the children went to bed at a certain time. And that gave me the option of working in the evening if I needed to, but also it allowed the mornings to be a little bit more predictable, because we knew what time they would wake up, which was usually sometime between 5 and 6. And it meant that I could schedule my alarm to wake me up a bit earlier so I can get some quiet time before they wake up. Or if I needed to do any writing, I could have that early morning quiet to be able to do that in somewhat of a predictable way, a semi-predictable way. Because like I said, children are, we're all human beings, and we're not rigid robots that just stick to a routine. But by having that routine, it made it a little bit more predictable. So that really, really helped to make the journey easier for myself. The sixth thing that made my PhD journey easier and more doable was having scheduled family time. And I know it feels like, well, how on earth does that make it easier? Well, it made it easier for me because I was able to really recharge on the weekends when we had that family time. So we would have like a designated family day. We'd do activities. We'd go to the park. We'd go and spend some time together, go for long walks, and just do things that helped us to engage with each other, interact with each other. And by doing that, it made it easier for me because I was able to really recharge. I was able to detach my mind from my PhD, which is a very hard thing to do. And I was able to just enjoy that time. And so you may not have the luxury of spending both days in the weekend, just relaxing with family. Maybe you're working full time and the weekends are the only time that you don't have scheduled work to attend to. But maybe you can set aside half a day on the weekend. Maybe you can set aside a full day on the weekend and just, think about the thesis on the other day of that weekend. Or maybe say, you know what, I'm going to set aside 2 weekends a month where I'm not going to do any PhD work. I'm just going to enjoy my family time. It doesn't really matter the frequency of it. I think it just matters the consistency of it, really, where you say, actually, no, I need some scheduled time to decompress from the stress of the PhD and just enjoy time with my family, enjoy the time with people that I love and laugh and enjoy the moments and build memories and take photos and do all those fun things. And I think it's obviously, good for everyone else involved as well. But I think in terms of PhD motherhood, it really gives you that time to pause. I talked earlier in one of the other episodes about the benefit of having a reflective pause. And it really allows you the opportunity to do that. And so having family activities and family days helps to make it easier because you have the opportunity to remind yourself of what really matters on this journey. It's easy to get caught up in all the PhD deadlines and PhD, related activities. But what about, recharging the person who is doing the PhD? What about self-care? What about family time? These are things that matter. And I think if you schedule that family time and days where it's like, I'm just going to commit to enjoying time with the people I love, it allows you that reflective pause. And I think that just makes the whole journey more tolerable and doable and prevents things like burnout. So it's really, really, really key that you do try and incorporate that. So the seventh thing that we did that made my PhD motherhood journey easier was that we maximized our parental leave. And we had our sons. My husband had paternity leave. I had maternity leave. My maternity leave in the UK I took almost a year, I think, with all of my children. And so that really helped me to, on the back of what I just said about that, taking that family time and that reflective pause. Maternity leave was that for me times 100. It was just a time to just take a break. I prepared everything I needed to prepare before I went on maternity leave in terms of my PhD, made sure that things were in place, things were on hold because nobody else was doing the work for me. I had to come back to it. So making sure that I closed up as many loops as I needed to before I went on maternity leave so that when I come back, I'm already 20% there. And so that really helped me to, again, completely detach from my PhD. During my maternity leave, I did not do any work on my PhD whatsoever. Nothing. Zilch. Nada, right? Nothing. I just enjoyed the time. I just allowed myself and my body time to heal, time to, recharge itself, time to just enjoy and create new bonds with my newborn. And it really just also allowed us the opportunity to work on other things. As a family, we then worked on the Doodle Dozen brand that we have, the children's books that my sons inspired me to write. We were able to do so many other things. And I think that was part of the benefit of having that maternity leave and having that time away from my PhD. And during that time, I started my blog and it's brought us to this point. So some amazing things can happen during maternity leave. And I think one of the key things is to use that time to just enjoy the time with the people you love, enjoy the time being a new mom, enjoy the time recovering if you've had to, recovering from the birth experience, and just, there's so many emotional and hormonal changes happening, and to have the pressure of a PhD on your mind through all of that is just a recipe for disaster. You need to park that PhD and just really focus on healing. New mamas, we go through so many experiences. Some of us may have had a traumatic birth experience, or you may have had to have a C-section. You've got to allow your body extra time to heal from that. Or maybe some people may experience postpartum depression. And I think just giving yourself that time to adapt, to adjust, to heal, to recover, to just enjoy the time that you've got with the people you care about, I think is essential. And so that was one of the things that really helped me by maximizing our maternity and paternity leaves, taking the full time we were entitled to, and also making sure that we make it meaningful and useful. And that's what we did. So I think that was definitely one thing that helped make my PhD motherhood journey a lot easier. On that note as well, I think one of the things that made my PhD motherhood journey easier was making time for my dreams, making time for the things that I felt passionate about. Like I mentioned, the children's book series Doodle Dozen was something that we were able to bring to life during a maternity period. And we were able to make the time to make that happen. And I think that even if you are doing a PhD, just having other passions is so important. Having other things that bring you joy, whether it's reading new books or painting or craft or cooking or whatever passion it is, photography, who knows? Like just find something that will allow you that creative space. I think that was so important. Learning new skills, making the time to learn new skills. I learned so many new skills unrelated to my PhD during my PhD, right? And I think those are skills I will have for life. Those are things I will have in my arsenal for the rest of my life. And I was able to pursue passions. I was able to pursue passion projects. I was able to follow creative adventures. And so I think by just making time for my dreams, figuring out what it is that I want, what is it that I love doing, and making a bit of time for that. You may not necessarily be able to take it to its full extent during your PhD, but if you could just start with something, do you love photography? Maybe find a lovely park nearby. Go there and you just spend some time taking some beautiful photos of the blossoms, of pollinators, of butterflies and all these things. I mean, honestly, like we guilt ourselves into thinking as mamas doing PhDs that we've got to spend all of our awake time working on our PhDs, looking after our families. But it's really important that you're able to make some time for your dreams as well. And I think that's one of the things that made my PhD journey easier as a mama, because I was making time for the things that I wanted to do. I was making time for other areas of my own personal growth that I wanted to pursue, things I wanted to learn, things I wanted to do. And I think that just made my journey so much more fulfilling and easier. Okay, so the eighth thing that made my PhD motherhood journey easier, and I know this is going to be a little bit controversial, right? But I'm going to say it anyway. And it was that I stopped watching the news every day. Of course, there are some horrible things happening in the world, and my heart breaks. It literally breaks when I read, when I see, when I hear about these things. But I used to watch the news every single morning. And I noticed, especially during COVID, that really brought on so much anxiety for me. And it made me feel anxious all the time, just thinking about all these atrocities. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to try not watching the news every morning. I'm going to try not to do that. So instead, we just put on some calm music in the morning as we are having our breakfast and having conversation with each other and getting started for our days. And that has transformed my days. I am able to approach my days with so much more positivity, so much more enthusiasm for the day, so much more peace of mind. And so when I want to know what's happening in the world, I just read it. I have the news apps on my phone. I can still access them. I can still read about it, but I have control over what I read about. I have control over what's being thrown at me, and I have control over when I consume that information. So I don't need to start my day with all of this bad news. I can choose to start my day with positivity, refilling myself and composing myself. And then I can always look at the news later in the day. And so that really, really transformed my journey. So I then was feeling so much more positive, feeling so much more hopeful. And I was still able to keep on top of the news by reading it on my phone, as opposed to watching it on the television and just being bombarded with lots of things that I have no control over. And so that has really transformed my journey. And I think if you are feeling like, oh my goodness, I'm just anxious all the time, just feeling so on edge all the time, think about whether you are putting yourself in the way of things that are not necessarily feeding your spirit first thing in the day. Maybe you can look at that stuff later. We can't ignore the fact that things are happening in the world. That's not helpful either. But at least if we can choose how we start our days, if we can choose how we consume that information, whether we are watching the news and all these things are popping up, or whether we can just read it on our phone at our leisure, or read it in a newspaper at our leisure, that's different. And so that's what I did. And it really helped me. It's not for everyone. There's some people who just, want to be on top of the news and know what's happening as it happens in the world. And I totally get that, because I was definitely that person as well. But now I have realized that by taking back control over what I consume and what I look at has really helped to change my general feeling, change how I'm feeling each day. And that has helped me to make my PhD motherhood journey easier and more enjoyable. It's just given me that helpful filter. And then I have been able to take back that control so that I'm not at the mercy of what's shown to me, but I get to decide when and what I consume. And that just has had such a positive impact on my mental health. Okay, so the ninth thing that made my PhD motherhood journey easier was letting go of trying to be perfect. Honestly, letting go of trying to be perfect, trying to do all the things, trying to do all the extra things. And this is hard because I was a perfectionist and I had to really work through that and understand how I can thrive without needing to be perfect, and how I can be purposeful without needing to be perfect. So letting go of this need to have the perfectly put together house, having to have everything perfect, have everything in place, just letting go of that, letting go of feeling like I need to show up for everything for my PhD, all of the extras that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. You are on a PhD journey to complete that journey, right? I am not saying to don't give things your best effort, because I don't like sloppy work either. I want to give things my best effort, but it doesn't mean you have to do everything. Giving the things that matter your best effort is what is important. So giving the things that truly matter, what do you need to do and achieve as a mama doing a PhD? What are the things that you need to accomplish to make this journey complete and to see it through? Those are the things that you focus on. All these extra appointments, meetings, conferences, extra things that don't necessarily matter in the grand scheme of things in terms of getting to the finish line of your PhD, you don't have to worry about these things. Having a tidy house, does that make a difference to whether you finish your PhD or not? Does that make a difference to whether your kids are happy and comfortable and safe? No, it doesn't. And so you can let go of some of those things and just embrace the essentials, just embrace the things that you need to make your journey enjoyable and doable and to see it through to completion. And just one more point to add on this. I think the important thing is to remember that there are seasons to every phase of life, that life is, made up of various seasons. And there may be a period of time where you can't necessarily devote all your energy to certain aspects of your journey, your life. And it's okay to remember that this is a season and that there will come a time where you'll be able to pay more attention to certain things in life. So what I mean by that is, if there are lots of extra PhD curricular things that you could be doing that quote unquote look really good on the CV, maybe now isn't the time to explore those things. Maybe there'll be plenty of time after your PhD to do all those extracurricular PhD related things, getting all of the experience that you think you need. I think maybe recognizing that there will come a time where you'll be able to do that stuff, where you'll be able to attend all the conferences, teach all the courses, do all the things that you want to do if that's your career goal. But recognizing that in this season of PhD motherhood, perhaps some of those things can take a back seat, and it's okay for them to take a back seat because it's not the season for them. It sounds like that contradicts something that I said earlier, which is that, find things that you love. And if those are the things that you love, by all means do them. But if they're feeling like an additional burden on an already full plate, then I think it's okay to not necessarily pursue all of those things right now. Focus on the things that actually move the needle forward in terms of your PhD journey, and focus on the things that help you to invest in yourself. Focus on the things that help you to, be able to make your highest contribution. And that may not necessarily be doing all of the extracurricular PhD things. It may be just spending time on self-care. It may be spending time with your family and doing the things that recharge your spirit. And so I think there is room for additional things on this journey, but those should be decided by you and what you need, rather than what's expected of you, rather than what everybody thinks you should be doing, or even rather than what everybody else is doing, right? Because of course you've got colleagues who may not have the responsibilities that you have, and they're able to engage in all those other things, but maybe you need to just focus on what is moving the needle in your PhD and what's helping you as a person, as a mama doing this PhD, to make your highest contribution, looking after yourself and spending time with the people that you love. So I hope that helps to reassure you that what really matters right now is looking after yourself and finishing your PhD, if that's what you want to do. Of course, if it is that you don't see a PhD in your future, then it's okay to walk away from that as well. I talk about that extensively in other episodes. But if this is something that you want to do and you want to see it through to completion, it's okay to just focus on that. It's okay to just focus on that and to just focus on you. And that is enough to get you to the finish line. You don't need all of these extra things that you think you need. You just need to move that PhD needle, and you need to invest in yourself and looking after yourself and your family. And so the final thing that I did to make my PhD journey easier and more enjoyable was that I focused on the journey itself. And I know this sounds cliche of like, oh, focus on the journey. But literally, that is what I did. I focused on each little mini milestone. So what do I mean by focusing on the journey and not the destination? Because when I thought about the destination, I couldn't picture it. I could not picture myself on many occasions completing my PhD journey, because when I thought about the destination, I couldn't picture it. I couldn't see that far ahead. I couldn't imagine it. Yes, it was something that I was clearly working towards achieving, but I just couldn't imagine it because it felt so intangible. And so what I did instead was I chose to focus on the journey. And by that, I mean, I focused on the little mini milestones, the baby steps, the things that were right in front of me that I could focus on to get me to the next step. And then once I achieve that thing, I then focus on the next step to get me forward. And I just built myself this constant state of momentum. And even though it was slow momentum by other people's standards, potentially, it was still momentum. I was still moving forward. I was still meeting my milestones. And I was able to do that because I focused on the journey and not the destination. That also includes your motherhood journey, right? Yes, you want to do all the things with the kids and, you want to raise sensible and decent children who do well in life. But if you focus on that, you ignore and you can't see that what you really need to be focusing on is the day-to-day, the interaction, being present in little moments, being there for your kids when they need you today, not when they're 20 and 30 years old, today, right? And so by focusing on the journey and not the destination, it just allows us to focus on those things that are actually doable, that are actually achievable, that are actually within reach. They're within our grasp, right? And we can actually take action on those things. And it allows us to focus on the things that we can actually do in this moment. And so that's the 10th thing, just focusing on the journey. Don't get caught up in the destination. The destination is going to come. I posted on Instagram recently, I don't know if you saw it, but I shared a post that talked about focusing on the being. Focus on the being of this journey and the becoming will happen. Because we get so caught up in thinking about all of the future things. And don't get me wrong, having a big vision is great and it's amazing. It's a good thing. I've got bucket loads of ambition too, but focusing on the journey, focusing on the being allows you to be present, allows you to take purposeful action right now so that you can build that momentum and it will take you into the realm of the becoming. And that will happen in its time. Every scholarly mama has her season. And if you focus on the present season, the future seasons will fall into place. So I hope that this episode has encouraged you. These are just some of the things that have helped to make my PhD motherhood journey easier and more doable. Of course, there are others. I just wanted to keep this episode nice and succinct. And so, I hope that those are some of the things that you could think about to help make your journey through PhD motherhood easier and more achievable as well. And also more enjoyable, right? Because again, this isn't just about achieving. This is also about enjoying, as I said in the last point, enjoying the journey. So I hope you found this episode helpful. I cannot wait to speak to you in the next one. And can you believe that we are now into our second year of this podcasting journey? Honestly, if you haven't listened to my last episode, which was the episode which I talked about reaching this milestone of 52 episodes, please do tune into that one. I hope you will enjoy it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Until next time, Mama, sending you lots of love and gratitude as usual. Take care for now. Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Mrs. Mummy PhD podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and if you did and you want in on this movement, please head over to mrsmummyphd.com or scholarlymamas.com. If you want to do your PhD well without sacrificing yourself or those you love dearest, then you need your hands on my free training called the PhD with Purpose Webinar. When you join us inside Scholarly Mamas Explore, you'll get access to this free training and so much more. Remember, Mama, these are our journeys of becoming.